Join me as I learn how to trim ceramic bowls. Here's some of my tools that I've been using. They're just the cheap stuff that came with my potter's wheel. First we start by laying down slip, and this helps the pot adhere to the wheel and stick to it so that it doesn't spin off whilst I begin my trimming. I realised that I should actually do the inside of the circle. I think my initial strokes were to put the rim down on top, but I realised that obviously the base of the bowl is much shorter, so I decided to just put it all over the wheel, so I've got a much better chance of getting it right. Once on the wheel, you can see that it isn't centred, so I'll need to tap centre it. So I begin by tapping it with my index finger in the middle, just so I can get a sense of where the central position is. I've still got a lot to learn about how to tap centre, and as you can see here, it took a couple of attempts to get it right. Finally got that nice central position, and now I just need to push the base down onto the slip again so it sticks. I've also decided to put a few blobs of clay around the edge just to really hold that bowl in place. Next I'm going to take my little tool here and just lightly trim off the bits of clay that I don't want so it creates a nice smooth surface. I'd let the bowl dry out a little bit too much, so the lip here on the outside is relatively dry and the clay is flaking off rather than coming off as a nice consistent ribbon. However, it's probably borderline okay, so just continuing to pull more clay off and reduce it down to a nice smooth shape. You can see here, the more I'm using the tool to burnish, I'm holding it in a fixed position and letting the rotation of the bowl be the determining factor that cuts the clay down. This allows me to create a consistent surface all the way around the bowl, rather than the bowl determining the direction and height of the stick itself. It's really important to do that because if you let the bowl determine things, you'll end up with more of a lumpy surface. So making sure to hold it nice and firm and distance from the bowl surface. I'm now just burnishing the edges of the lip and also the top edge of the bowl with a metal kidney. Finally, just gonna do some of the inside of the bowl as well. It was a tiny bit uneven, it didn't really need much work, but again, I'm just learning here, so any opportunity I can take to practice trimming, I'll definitely give it a go. I think in the future, I probably won't trim inside of the bowl unless it is a bit of a mess. I find it much easier to create a nice smooth surface inside of the bowl than on the outside, and when you come to glaze it later, it can sometimes be quite nice to have those little ridges for the glaze to pool inside of. So just kind of finishing up, burnishing and trimming the inside of the bowl, getting that nice even consistency before I begin to then flip the bowl over and do the same thing to the base. I did find it quite distracting having these little worms of clay, I don't know what you'd call them, let me know in the comments below. So I decided to just pull them out every so often so I can see what I'm doing. They did tend to collect inside of the bowl. And again, just doing a little bit more attention detail to the lip. I mentioned in a few videos how important it is to have that really clean, crisp lip, and it can really help to contribute to how finished a bowl can look. I found it really difficult to hold the stick at an equal distance from the edge of the rim, so I decided to use my hand to brace, and what I'm doing with my fingers is also then burnishing the clay as it slides between my fingers. So I've finished the rim and the inside of the bowl, so now it's time to remove the bowl from the wheel. I struggled a little bit here, but after a few attempts I managed to pry it loose and then clean the wheel and flip the bowl over, ready for the bottom. Again, just like before, I'm tap centering. I got the bowl a little bit more central than the last time, so it didn't really need too much correction, but just a tiny bit of correction here. Again, I just braced my hand just to get that equal distance, before doing a little bit more tapping just to get it right nice and centre on top of the wheel. Once I found centre, again a few more blobs of clay. What I'm doing here is pushing the clay into the wheel so that it pushes up and against the edge of the bowl rather than pushing it into the bowl. I've seen if you push the clay into the bowl, it can sometimes warp the walls. So by pushing it down and onto the wheel, it won't warp the walls, but it will hold it nice and securely in place. As you can see, the bottom of the bowl is a little bit messy, so what I'm doing first is getting that nice flat edge to the bowl and getting it all a consistent height, and then just bringing in the edge or the corner of the bowl so that it curves nicely into the base. You'll start to see that I'm removing less and less clay as I'm getting to that nice flat finished shape. Once I've done this a couple of times, I'll then start to think about creating feet for the bowl. I really like it when the bowl is raised slightly off the table. It gives the viewer the impression that the bowl is floating. And this again, just like with the lip, it contributes to making the viewer think that the bowl is substantially lighter and more delicate than it potentially is. I brace my hand so that the clay that I'm removing is consistent and that my hand can hold the tool at an equal distance. You can see that the tool is bouncing slightly, so that's why it's really important to hold your hand an equal distance away from the clay so that you are removing only the bits that are sticking up and create a nice consistent finish. Continuing now to scrape off the clay and again just tidying up the surface just so I can see what's going on and how far I've chipped away. And then switching to this more delicate or thin tool, I begin to mark out where I want the feet to be, and then from the centre I slowly start to remove clay away and pushing it out towards the edge of where the inside of the foot will finally rest. I really like trimming away the bottom of the bowl. I find it quite therapeutic, seeing all those little worms of clay slowly get pulled away. So I'm now working to finish the inside of the bowl using the same techniques that I have previously, reducing more and more clay until I have that desired depth. I sometimes get a little bit carried away here and often go a bit too deep, so what I was doing there with my index finger is just testing the thickness of the clay. However, for this piece I did in fact go slightly too deep, and that's definitely a lesson learned for me there. I think in future, even though I like this really high foot, I either need to include a bit more clay at the bottom of my bowls or just not trim it so deeply. I think sometimes I get so caught up with trimming and the satisfaction of removing clay, sometimes I forget how much I'm removing from the bottom of the bowl itself. Really, with the feet, what it should happen is that the outer edge of the bowl should look as if it is at the same distance away from the inner side of the bowl that I'm taking clay away from here, and that the feet should look like they've been added on as extra on top of the bowl surface, so that the bowl surface runs smoothly from the edge to the feet and then under the feet into the centre. So now just clearing up some of the little wormies of clay before turning my attention to the outside of the bowl. So using the same technique of bracing my hand, holding the tool tightly and removing slowly pieces of clay from the edge of the bowl, I begin to pull the surface of the bowl down so that it is a similar height to the one I've created on the inside of the feet. You can see here that the foot is starting to take shape, and I'm finding it really satisfying seeing those huge coils of clay coming off the bowl surface. Now I've finished with my trimming and I just need to remove the bowl off the wheel, so clearing off all of that gunk and that rubbish that's formed around the edge of the bowl and the clay that I used to stick the bowl to the wheel, and now slowly removing the bowl from the wheel. What I've done here is I'm holding onto the edge of the bowl and then I turn the wheel on and it just pulls it away nicely. So a little bit of extra worms got stuck to the edge, but pretty smooth. I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.